How should an AI system reply when students ask a question about the justifiability of abortion? Or consider this. What if a language model, used in classrooms around the globe, routinely suggests that God is the most important thing in life, or that one should not be proud of their nationality? Let's explore how cultural biases in AI might shape such responses and their implications for education and beyond. Greetings, knowledge seekers. Dr. Yogaila Vaitakaitis here. You're tuning in to EDU Papers. We're diving into a preprint research paper titled Cultural Bias and Cultural Alignment of Large Language Models by Tao, Viberg, Baker, and Kizilchek. It has to do with psychology, sociology, and is important for how we educate future generations. Our source material is a pretty dense research paper, so I'll break it down and pull out the most thought-provoking parts. The paper starts by reminding us how much culture shapes our values and behaviors, especially through the use of language. For example, think about how differently cultures view respect for authority. What's polite in one culture could be seen as totally inappropriate in another. Language is a powerful conduit for transmitting culture. Consider the early bird catches the worm in English, which promotes individual initiative, versus collectivist proverbs in other cultures that stress harmony. Through such expressions, language passes down cultural norms and worldviews, and that's where it gets tricky with artificial intelligence. Large language models, like ChatGPT, are trained on huge amounts of text data. That data isn't culturally neutral. It reflects the values of whoever created it and the sources it's trained on. So these artificial intelligences might inherit a cultural worldview and pass it on to us when we use them. That's kind of a big deal. The study uses a tool called the cultural map to measure these differences. It's based on the World Values Survey, a huge data set covering over 100 countries. Picture a graph where countries are plotted based on two dimensions: survival versus self-expression, and traditional versus secular values. Let me break that down for you. Think of survival values as prioritizing security, stability, and tradition. Self-expression values emphasize well-being, tolerance, and personal freedom. It's like a spectrum. On one end, following tradition is paramount, and on the other, individual freedom is celebrated. So where does artificial intelligence fit on this map? How did they actually measure its cultural location? Now this is where it gets interesting. For our social science enthusiasts, here's the methodology unboxing. They asked the artificial intelligence the same questions they'd ask a human in a cultural survey designed to pinpoint those core cultural values. They wanted to be really sure the artificial intelligence wasn't just reacting to specific words in the questions. So they used 10 different variations of each prompt, tweaking the wording slightly each time. That's smart. Artificial intelligence can be pretty sensitive to subtle changes in language. They always started with a description of the respondent. For example, you are an average human being responding to the following survey question. But for models after GPT-3, they got even more precise. They used a system prompt to describe the respondent and a separate user prompt for the question and response format. It's all about controlling for variability. They wanted to minimize the chances that the artificial intelligence's response was due to a quirk in the wording, rather than its underlying cultural understanding. It's a level of detail that's crucial in social science research. So, after all that careful preparation, what did they actually find? Where did the artificial intelligence land on the cultural map? The results were pretty obvious. All 5 GPT models clustered around the values associated with English-speaking and Protestant European countries. They leaned heavily towards self-expression values. Think about its impact on education. If teachers and students rely on AI systems that reflect a narrow cultural lens, we risk perpetuating cultural homogeneity. Education, ideally a space for diverse perspectives, could become another echo chamber for dominant cultural narratives, a cultural colonialism of a sort. But it gets even more interesting when we look at what happens when the researchers tried to fix this bias. Literature review highlights 3 primary strategies are used for mitigating cultural bias. The first involves prompting in different languages to elicit culturally specific values, though this proved largely ineffective across 14 countries. The second strategy focuses on fine-tuning models with culturally relevant data, a resource-intensive approach that's feasible for only a select few, as seen with Swedish and Japanese versions of GPT. The third and most flexible approach that his team of scientists used, cultural prompting, instructs the model to respond as if it were from a specific cultural context. Imagine you're using an artificial intelligence writing assistant and you tell it, "Write this email as if you were someone from Japan." So you're giving the artificial intelligence a specific cultural context to work with. Did it work? It's not quite that simple. The researchers were very systematic, as you might expect. They used the prompt, "You are an average human being born in country territory and living in country territory, responding to the following survey question," before each question from the World Values Survey. They're trying to prime the artificial intelligence to think from a particular cultural perspective. And the results were a mixed bag, which is often the case with complex social science research. For the newer GPT models, like versions 4, 4 Turbo, and 4.0, cultural prompting did improve the cultural alignment. For many countries, it worked for 71 to 81% of the countries they tested, which is pretty impressive. So, there's hope. It means we could potentially develop artificial intelligence tools that are more culturally aware and can tailor their output based on the user's background. That's one way to interpret the findings, but we have to be cautious. Cultural prompting didn't fix everything. Even with those newer models, there are still some countries where the artificial intelligence's responses didn't match up with the actual cultural values measured in the World Values Survey, so there's still some inherent bias baked into the system. It's a reminder that artificial intelligence development is a journey, not a destination. This has huge implications, especially for education. Imagine students using artificial intelligence tools for research or writing. If those tools have a built-in cultural bias, it could really impact how they learn and see the world. But here's a thought to ponder. Should every nation using AI systems like GPT actively embed their cultural identity and national values into these technologies, especially in schools? What if the country in question adheres to traditionalist or even anti-democratic principles? Should we allow such values to shape the worldview of future generations through AI? And more importantly, who decides which values are worth preserving? What do you think? Should more effort be put into culturally aligning AI systems, especially in education? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and suggest any papers you'd like me to explore next. This is Dr. Jogaila Vaitakaitis signing off from EDU Papers. Keep questioning, keep learning.